You're listening to Keeping It Real with Janine, your guide to living an authentic, healthy life podcast. I'm Janine Strong, and today I'm having an inspiring conversation with Marc Gilson. Marc has served as the Director of Client Services and Product Design at Centerpoint Research Institute for over 20 years. Some of you may have used Centerpoint's HoloSync meditation technologies. During that time, Marc has established himself as one of the most knowledgeable teachers in the world of meditation and sound-based therapies. He also manages Centerpoint's team of accelerated results life coaches and maintains a private coaching and mentoring practice. He's the author of numerous essays and articles on subjects ranging from personal development and mindfulness meditation to music appreciation and art therapy. Our topic today is sacred spacing, or creating time and space in your life for meditation and stillness, perhaps a mental health break, or time for woo-wee, or I hope I pronounced that right, or non-action and making a place for value in your lives. Hi Marc, how are you?
Hi Janine, it's really fun to be here. Thanks for having me on.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm really looking forward to this conversation because personally, I don't do enough of this myself, so I'm hoping you can get me back on track.
I hear you. I mean, every time I talk about this, it's certainly me, preaching to myself as much as to anybody else. So.
Absolutely.
Anyway, yeah, it's great to be with you and with your listeners too. There's a number of different ways that I talk about this topic, and I found in discussing it with people, especially to a group of people, that it's usually best to kind of begin with this little story that actually happened to me sometime back in, I was trying to figure out what year it was, but it must have been like the late 80s.
Mm-hmm. Well, I love stories, so please do.
Especially from the late 80s, maybe, right?
Yeah.
So at the time, this was before Centerpoint and what I do now. Back then, I was actually working as a physician recruiter for hospitals around the country. So I was on the phone pretty early talking to the East Coast because I am in Portland, Oregon. Mm-hmm. So at the time, I was working in downtown Portland, and I had this really long commute. And if anybody out there is living in Portland, they know driving in from the east side to downtown is going to take you a long time. And so I was usually running late to work and usually in a big hurry to get there. And on this particular morning, I parked my car and was rushing to the office when I came sort of flying around a corner. And I practically ran into this little older guy. And I realized he was probably homeless. He had this really ratty old backpack on, and it probably contained all his worldly possessions.
Mm-hmm.
He had kind of that grizzled look, and I knew what was coming next. He said, "Do you have 50 cents you could spare?" And I mean, I run into a lot of people like that, and I know they say be careful about handing money out, but I usually did it anyway. Mm-hmm. So I was already fishing around in my pocket, trying to get some change to give him. And I didn't have any coins. So I had a couple dollars, and I just kind of pulled that out in a hurry and stuck it in his hand and sort of hoped he'd let me get past him and get to my office and get on with my day. And as soon as I gave him the money, his eyes just lit up, and he says, "Wait a second, I want to show you something." So at this point, I was feeling pretty impatient, but I stood there while he rummaged around through his backpack, and eventually he found what he was looking for. And he stepped up kind of close to me, and he held something right up to my face. And it just took me a minute to realize what I was looking at. And it turns out it was a ring. And it was made of a thick copper wire. Mm-hmm. And what he had done is he took this single length of wire and wound it around a few times to make a ring out of it. Very simple. Mm-hmm. And at the top of it, he had created sort of a mounting with a little empty space in the middle, Uh-huh. And so he's holding it right up to my face, and he said, "I made this." And then he pointed to the mounting, and he said, "And that's the spot where the diamond would go."
Aww.
so excited about showing me this little ring he'd made. And then he said, "Here, this is yours."
Aw.
And he grabbed my hand and he put it in my hand. And I tried to decline, but he kept insisting. So, of course, I took it. I thanked him, dropped it in my pocket, and finally got upstairs to my office and plopped down on my desk to get to work. And I pulled the ring back out and put it on my desk. And every so often I'd look over at it and kind of think of that little guy and sort of ponder that encounter. And, the ring itself, I mean, it's just worth a few pennies. But what he had said about the spot where the diamond would go, I mean, that's what I really kept thinking about. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized, for me anyway, just how valuable the ring really was. And it came to represent something to me that I guess, at this point for me has really become a life lesson. Because, he could have taken his ring and he could have put something in the mountain. Not a diamond, probably, but maybe a piece of glass or a pebble or something like that. But, instead he left the spot open and he made a place for something of real value. And I don't know about you, I don't have any loose diamonds laying around either. But so I've kept the mounting on the ring open, but I keep that ring on me all the time.
Aww.
I always tell people it's not for sale at any price. But so, I mean, I don't mean to pretend that this story is terribly profound, but for me personally, the ring is a reminder to keep a place open in my life and my schedule for value. And so this is kind of the idea behind sacred spacing. I mean, what you really name it isn't all that important, but the important part is that we recognize the importance of creating some time and space for something sacred. And some people, they'll do this by going to church. Some people do it by meditating, which is what I do. Some just take a mental health break on a daily basis. But it's just critical that we create that space and keep that. Life will fill every minute of every day if you let it.
Yes, it will.
And if we're really honest with ourselves, most of the time, I mean, on a minute by minute basis, it's probably not all that important. I mean, I know there's a lot of important things that we all do. And, if you have a regular kind of 9 to 5 type job or 8 to 5 or 8 to 8 or whatever you have, that's enough to keep you busy. And then, getting home and, getting something to eat and getting your exercise in or watching your TV or whatever you do. There's no, people rarely kind of sit around and go, well, nothing for me to do, even if they, are just sitting around watching Netflix or something. So, so it's easy to fill time. Filling time is not a problem. You may feel bored. I know I do, even though my schedule is crazy. I definitely have moments of boredom. But I find that if I just allocate some time each day that is away from distraction and that is in a specific place in my house that's set aside for this, and it doesn't have to be a room, you don't need to kind of install an ashram or something in your living room. But I mean, if you have a little corner of your bedroom or some people even use, like, they can't clean out a closet and they sort of make it their little meditation booth, and they just kind of sit cross-legged on their zafu cushion or, their seiza bench or on the floor or whatever. And they just spend 10 or 15 minutes there. They're not watching, television. They're not on the phone. They're not playing, Angry Birds or anything. They're just sitting and just being for a few minutes and creating that sacred space. And I mean, this is really, to me, a key idea, and you've heard it said, I'm probably going to screw up the quote, but there's something said about this, the waters that are stirred up only become clear when they're left alone and no longer stirred up, and everything can kind of settle, and that's when the clarity comes. And that's what sacred spacing is all about. So I don't want to go on and on about this concept, but does that make sense to you? I know you, I've known you for years, and I know you're really, you're going to tell me, you're going to tell everyone how great you are. That's right. I know you do this.
Well, it made me think, because there are times when, like, when I'm just, how how do I want to say it? Not so much neutral, but when there's just nothing going on.
Yeah.
That's when the really good ideas just pop into my head.
Yeah.
And that's when those thoughts pop in that I know I should take note of, because
Hmm.
it's not something I was working on. It just sort of came out of nowhere, quote unquote.
Yeah.
Um, and and for me, that's usually like in the shower, or
Yeah.
but I find that playing the harp is also. I was talking about it with my teacher one day, and she said, because of the harp is a difficult instrument to play, and it occupies both your right and your left brain, and it kind of puts you in a
Mm.
place that's in a meditative place. And I know that even if I'm feeling crappy, if I force myself to sit down, I've got a new thing now. I have to play one song every day, even if I'm feeling
Yeah.
crappy. And it's actually working, because rarely do I play one song. Once I start feeling better. I start feeling kind of uplifted. My bad mood or whatever goes away, and I get some
Yeah.
energy, and I just keep going. So I used to meditate regularly, especially when I was with Bill, and
Hmm.
Center Point was the center of our lives. You're right, life takes over. It just seems like it's crazy. I was just talking to somebody a little while ago, and I said, it's like everybody is so busy. Everybody's got such full lives, and to make time for friends or getting together or doing
Yeah.
something different, it's like almost impossible. It's crazy.
It is. And, I mean, we talk about, I don't know if I'm sure you read Bill's book, Thresholds of the Mind. Of course, we're
Oh,
talking
yes.
about Centerpoint founder Bill Harris. And, in that book, he borrowed one of the terms that we used at Centerpoint for a long time, which is high velocity living, which
Mm.
really, I think is a great term. It really typifies or describes the culture. And I think personally, I don't know if everyone would agree with me, but I think culturally speaking, there is kind of a prejudice against stillness.
Yes, yes.
We prize activity. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
we prize diversion and distraction, and we tend to put a high value on things that are essentially nothing more than just kind of a distraction. And there's nothing wrong with being entertained and having those things. I still, even I'm 50 years old. I still enjoy playing video games sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I'll watch TV. I'm not like a person who's anti-TV, but I'm also careful to keep that in balance, because
Right.
I know that if I don't, those kinds of things just expand to fill the time that I have, that I'm not doing something else that I have to be doing.
Mm-hmm.
So this concept of sacred spacing, at least at first, it takes a certain amount of discipline. But here's the thing: is once you have made it a habit, it actually becomes kind of the easiest part of your day. You were talking about the heart. I mean, that's a perfect example of that.
Mm-hmm.
Is you start and you've made this commitment to play one song, and yet you almost always play more than one song,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yes.
So because once you're into it and you're doing it, and in your case, maybe you could say that it's not stillness, but that's not the sole definition of sacred spacing. What you're doing is you're making a place for value. You're keeping that mounting on your ring open and available for that experience to happen that you get. And if you stopped getting it from playing the harp, and I doubt you ever would, you'd
Mm-hmm.
probably be somebody who would find something else to do.
Yes.
And
My list
so
is long. Anyway.
I mean, yeah, good. And I mean, it should be, because there's a lot of things in life. I mean, you know, there's so many people who I think, and you get older and you start to realize, like, I mean, I heard this when I was young, and I just thought this was older people complaining how fast time goes. And
You,
it really is almost terrifying at times.
I honestly, I mean, I used to think that was a kind of a function of aging. So I had read somewhere that the time was actually speeding up, and
Yes.
and that it has, I believe, if I recall correctly, that it has something to do with the Schumann resonance changing.
Well,
And it makes sense to me, because it has to be speeding up. I don't know where the time goes.
yeah.
It,
It feels like that. I've heard those theories too. I don't know. I haven't done enough research to really kind of. I'm certainly no expert in this area, but I know that the concept of the expanding universe and some of these the quantum theory and quantum entanglement kind of give people um, gives the suggestion that there's a reason why that feeling is. And maybe you're right. Maybe it's not just aging, but I can certainly tell you for me, it's starting to dawn on me. Like I don't have the kind of time that I really want.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe who does, but so that though makes the time that you spend each day even more valuable.
Mm-hmm.
It increases the importance of doing this. And I won't kid you, it takes discipline. There are people with very, very truly busy, hectic lives, and I really don't know how they do it. There's people who are doing 2-3 jobs and they've got kids. And,
Oh, I know.
It's crazy. I kind of do my thing, and I do have, most evenings, not every evening, but if I need to make space, I can do that. I recognize that it's not easy. And I want to mention something else too, because not only in terms of time, but physical space, I've had people who say, I live in this tiny little apartment and I don't have any, I'm overrun already. I don't have any place really to do that. That I can set aside that is just exclusively for me to sit down and listen.
Lie down on your bed.
There you go. I mean, sacred spacing also has to do with not just the physical space, but time.
Right.
And, if you're fortunate enough to live someplace close to a park and you can go outside or sit in the backyard or on your front porch, or, some people, I've somebody on my team here named David, he's one of our coaches. For him, he takes a portion of his lunch break every day and he sits in his car and he practices chanting. This is something he's done for, years. And he just takes a few minutes. And so if you're walking by out in the parking lot, you might hear someone doing these beautiful chants. I don't know what language it is, but, this is his sacred time.
Mm-hmm.
And he creates that space just sitting in his car where he's not bothered, he's not distracted. And that's the kind of thing we're talking about. He's making a place for value, and much like your heart playing, that's something I think that he prizes.
Mm-hmm.
It's a huge value in his life, and I don't think he'd give it up.
Well, I was thinking, because I have been meditating more, not every day yet, but I find, like for me, and this may not be the proper use, but for me, putting on my headset and listening to a recording, a sound recording for meditation, to me, it's a break from the day.
Yeah.
It allows me to go away and just take a break from life.
Maybe some of your listeners happen to be HoloSync users, and so that's what HoloSync is. HoloSync is a sound technology that's designed to aid and facilitate.
Just had a little interruption with the phone ringing, so Mark and I just took a little aside, and we're coming right back now to continue the conversation on HoloSync meditation.
Right. Well, and the only point I was making, because you were talking about using audio to kind of do like an audio meditation, and I know you've done HoloSync too for many years, but that's really what HoloSync is. It's just the benefit of the technology, which is to improve the effects of meditation and in many ways accelerate the results of long-term meditation. That's obviously the technology's benefit, but in a way, the companion benefit is that it kind of forces you to carve that time out. If you want to get the benefit, you need to sit down and actually listen to it. And there's a way to do that gives you the best overall result. And that way is to basically be in a sacred spacing, environment where you're free of distraction and, you're not watching TV and trying to multitask but the other point I wanted to make about that you kind of triggered in my mind was that I think, I've coached a lot of people through meditation over the past 23, 24 years. And it often, kind of strikes me how hard it is for people to do what is essentially the simplest thing that you can ask a human being to do, which is to sit down for half an hour, 20 minutes, or even an hour and not do anything.
Mm-hmm.
The amount of resistance that we can create to doing that, you don't have to think, you don't have to watch anything, you don't have to respond, you don't have to exert yourself in any particular way. What is it that's so hard? We do it when we go to the movies.
Mm-hmm.
We do it when we sit in class. We do it if we go to church, or we go to see a concert. I mean, maybe we're not sitting perfectly still, but it's still time in one place. But there's something about meditation that makes it extra hard. And I've had a friend for years who's taught classical Vipassana meditation and other forms of sitting meditation.
Mm-hmm.
And he tells me he always starts off with he does 6-month courses. And he always starts off with maybe like 60 or 70 people who sign up, and they're really enthused and they're ready to do this. And their doctors have said you should learn how to meditate because your blood pressure is sky high and, whatever. And, after the first 3 weeks, that number of 50 or 60 people has dropped off to about 15.
Wow.
And I mean, this is a very simple form of meditation. Now, I'm not making fun of those people because I know what that's like. I know what it's like to find. And I sometimes would rather just sit and watch a rerun of a television show, right? Or take a nap. I'm a huge fan of naps.
Mm-hmm. Me too.
And for a while I used to convince myself, well, it's kind of like meditation, and it's not. But there's such a difficulty that we have around it. And it's not just an attitude problem. It's really a conditioning problem. And part of the challenge really with meditating or being still and creating that space is that it kind of puts us in out of our comfort zone. And we're sort of sitting with aspects of ourselves that we don't always like.
Mm-hmm.
The focus suddenly begins to turn inward and the mirror begins to appear before us. And we find ourselves sort of gazing into it. And, maybe we don't like what we see.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, what we at Centerpoint call resistance. And we all have it. They're like belly buttons. Everybody's got one. Everybody's got some internal resistance. That's just normal. But how do you cope with it?
Right. That's what I was going to ask you. So what do you do about that?
For us, the antidote to resistance is this technique called witnessing. And, witnessing is something that we've taught people for many, many years. And it's really just a mindfulness technique that involves watching with curiosity and accepting every thought, feeling, and sensation that you notice you're having.
Mm-hmm. No judgment.
No judgment and no fixing. This isn't, we are problem solvers by training. Everything that we have done in our lives, we think, is a result of our superb problem-solving skills. The job that you have, or the money that you have, or the education you have, or the things that you've acquired. This is all because, down to what you had for lunch today. You had to think about how to accomplish that if you want to feed yourself, unless someone's bringing you food on a regular basis, which is a pretty good deal. Mm-hmm. But by and large, we think of problem solving as the avenue to solution, to giving ourselves answers. Witnessing takes you out of that. In fact, it really demands that you don't get into problem solving mode at all. And again, we're talking about what is coming from within. Running away from something that makes you uncomfortable is sort of okay when it comes to external things. Mm-hmm. If you're living 6,000 years ago and there's a tiger that's chasing you down the path, well, then run. Don't
Absolutely.
Don't decide that's a good time to sit down and meditate, because it's not. Use your instincts and go. But when it comes to things that are coming from within, meaning our own thoughts and feelings and sensations, running away is kind of futile. You're sort of trying to run away from yourself. And I don't remember who said it now, but that old saying, wherever you go, there you are. You're
right.
not going to outrun your own thoughts and feelings and sensations.
I would call it counterproductive.
Yeah, that's putting it mildly. So with witnessing, what you do is you go, okay, I'm having this thought, feeling, or sensation I don't like. And I know that this is me resisting. Okay. So rather than trying to outrun it or, go into fight or flight or eat it up or make it leave me alone, I'm just going to watch it. I'm just going to become an observer of this thing. And isn't that interesting? Look how it affects me. It sort of makes me feel tense. It makes my jaw clench. It makes my stomach kind of upset.
Mm-hmm.
It makes me feel angry. It makes me feel kind of sad.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I feel tearful. So doing that is what the result of doing that, I should say, is not so that you figure out a creative fix for the problem. It's so that you acknowledge the thoughts or the resistance behind the thoughts or feelings or sensations, and it dissipates on its own. This stuff wants to get out of your system. If you get out of the way, it will do that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Dr. Daniel Amen, who some of your listeners may know, he wrote a book called Change Your Brain, Change Your Life. And in that book, the core of the book, or the takeaway for me, was that he described what many of us already kind of knew, which is that thoughts are things and that they have an impact on the material world. Mm-hmm. And they have a very specific impact on your brain chemistry. Most of the time, we think of changing brain chemistry as a result of something that we eat or something that we swallow in terms of a pill or medication, or something we inject, or something kind of from the outside in terms of a substance. We don't realize that we can have many of the same kinds of effects that chemicals and food have on our brains by actually conjuring a specific kind of thought. Mm-hmm. And Dr. Amen was one of the first people to demonstrate scientifically that the brain is absolutely capable of changing its chemistry based on thought alone. Mm-hmm. And that's what Change Your Brain, Change Your Life is really all about. But anyway, one of the things in that book that he brings up is what he calls ants. And ants are automatic negative thoughts. Mm-hmm. And if you think about it, if you're anything like me, there's plenty of ants to go around.
Yep.
Especially in today's world. So the idea is to squash the ants. And the squashing of the ants, the automatic negative thoughts, is done by mindfully accepting their presence. Mm-hmm. Because it's sort of like flipping the light on. And when you do that, the ants kind of scurry back into the darkness.
Right.
Automatic negative thoughts only thrive in the darkness of, unconscious awareness, where we're not paying conscious attention to them. Once we shine the light of conscious awareness through witnessing, they can't kind of infest us anymore. They have to kind of go away, because we're beginning to shift from being reactionary to making conscious, intentional choices about what we want to think and feel and experience on a moment-by-moment basis.
Interesting. So what I hear you saying is that instead of trying to push the negative, use the word negative, not useful, whatever, thoughts away, or trying to push them down, trying to get rid of them, it's best to shine a light on them and just observe them.
It's best to become conscious and aware of them. People struggle with it, and yes, you're exactly right. The reason it's hard for us to do is because sometimes we think if we don't kind of fight these things off and are constantly vigilant about this stuff, and everyone kind of just, no negativity for me, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, good luck with that. Yeah. It's very hard unless you're living in a very remote location for a very long period of time to avoid any kind of negativity or toxins, because you bring these things with you wherever you go. Mm-hmm. You are not immune to them simply because you're not on Facebook or you're not watching the news, right? Although that could help.
Yeah.
But there's a story of the monk who goes to the top of the remote mountain, and his goal is to attain the ultimate state of inner peace. And he gets up there and he finds a nice cave, and he's in there for 5 years, 10 years, 12 years. And finally, after about 15 years of solitary meditation, introspection, and he feels he's finally achieved that state of unshakable inner peace. And he's so excited. Like, he really wants to share this with his fellow human beings. And so he comes racing down the mountain, and he comes into the village, and he's got a big smile on his face, and he's all prepared. And he says, listen, I have a secret to inner peace, and I want to share it with you guys. It's going to blow your minds, And somebody kind of bumps into him and knocks him down. And and somebody's talking over him, and there's a kind of a kid screaming in the background, and all this stuff is going on, and he's so unaccustomed to all that he just loses it, and he just becomes very angry and hostile, and kind of upturns a couple apple carts or something, and runs out of the village. And the point is that whatever peace we manage really only serves a purpose if it helps us remain stable and gives us, you don't have to tell everybody how to attain inner peace if you are doing what you can do to exemplify it and live it. People can feel that vibe off you when you're really in a place of comfort. And they're going to want to know, how is it that you're doing this? Because it's not easy. So anyway, I mean, there's a lot that could be said about this, but that mindful acceptance, rather than going into fight or flight, is absolutely key. You don't have to like your feelings. You don't have to pretend that they are fun. You don't have to have a terrible experience and try to convince yourself that it's a positive, enjoyable experience. But you can't ultimately deny what is. And so many people I've coached over the years have this tendency to say, I'm really angry, or I'm really sad, and I know I shouldn't feel that way. And I think, what a huge waste of time. I mean, what a waste of energy. You are undermining your own feeling that you've already had.
Right.
It's too late to decide what you should or shouldn't feel because you've already acknowledged the feeling. And that's the beautiful step. Now that you've acknowledged it, it's yours to do something with. You can make a conscious choice now. It doesn't feel like it maybe in the moment, but you really can begin to make conscious choices about whether this is a resourceful feeling or an unresourceful feeling. And maybe sometimes you want to sit with the negative feeling. Maybe you're angry. Sit and be angry.
Right.
But do it consciously.
Right. I think that is the key, is doing things consciously. I know something. I was trying to think of what it was. I can't remember now, but something was going through me the other day, and I decided to step outside of myself and watch it. And I thought, wow, this is interesting. And it really helps it to shift. It's hard to explain how that happens. I don't know, but I do know that it can shift things and just take that emotional hook out of it.
Well, you've been at retreats, I think,
many,
several
yes.
retreats and all kinds of different retreats where those kinds of exercises have been done, and I've sat through them too. And the only thing I'd say is sometimes I feel like the point is missed because, I don't know that people are necessarily prepared oftentimes enough for the fact that the magic is not in that this is a magic spell or something that just causes all your stress or your problems to go away. It doesn't do that. I don't care how long you meditate, and you will experience stress. That's not in question. You will suffer. According to Buddhists, suffering pain is sort of inevitable. To a degree, suffering is inevitable. But at some point, you can begin to make choices about how you manage that pain and suffering.
Right. And
this is something many people don't in this culture, and I don't want to get preachy because this would be an easy soapbox for me to get on. But we unfortunately give a lot of attention to people who suffer. I mean, and I don't mean true victims, but I mean people who choose suffering as a means of getting that attention. It's become an emotional currency. And so few times do we really acknowledge stillness. I mean, how many times have you heard a parent say, "I'm so proud of my kid. Yesterday he spent 2 hours in his room just simply contemplating his life." It's like most people are going to say, "Why doesn't he go out and get a job? Why doesn't he go out and mow the lawn or do something productive?" And maybe he should, but there's nothing wrong with taking that time for yourself and spending a moment in that sacred space where it's you, it's your thoughts, and not be fearful of those thoughts. Understand that you are the one ultimately that has the power through witnessing, through mindful acceptance and curiosity, to decide for yourself which thoughts and feelings and sensations you will acknowledge and keep and which you will release.
What other, we've talked a lot about meditation, and well, first I had a question for you. about like using sound technology versus, um, say, uh, uh, Maharishi, doing
Hmm.
TM or something like that. Because I've done a lot of different kinds of meditation, and I'm never sure. I mean, the one thing I like about sound is that you really don't have to do anything, and a lot of times I will fall asleep, which I like because I figure it's still happening. The sounds are still happening, and if I fall asleep, I need some rest.
Hmm. Hmm.
And the TM and the city yoga meditations that I did, they all involve mantras. I was just wondering what your take on those variations were.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's a common question and it's a good one. I sort of usually start by making a point. I don't like to categorize meditation because there's so many different kinds, and people get very attached to their own form of meditation. And ultimately, I think
Mm-hmm.
people just sort of settle on what works best for them.
Mm-hmm.
But there are sort of two general kinds of meditation. There's the active and the passive forms of meditation. And active forms are obviously forms of meditation that you do while you're doing something else, like you're reciting a mantra, you are observing a mandala, you are counting your breaths, something along those lines, even up to sort of walking meditation. And some would say practices like Tai Chi or yoga, certain forms of yoga are also forms of active meditation.
Mm-hmm.
Passive meditation is really just being, just sitting. And in some ways, I think you could say that it's more challenging because you don't have anything going on.
Right. I think it is. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so you're really just sitting and watching your thoughts. Um, and as you notice thoughts, you sort of release your attachment to them. Now, when it comes to sound technology, that's a whole nother episode. But the short version to me is, first of all, I don't think that you can really kind of pit the concept of traditional meditation against sound-based meditation any more than you can say, I'm not sure whether I want to get from New York to LA. Should I walk or take a car or take an airplane or, ride a horse? I mean, these are all just different forms of transportation.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're persistent enough with any one of those things, or you're adept with any one of those things, you'll get there if you just keep going. But the advantage of some people say, well, using sound technology is kind of cheating, it's kind of cutting corners. Um, it is cutting corners. And
Mm-hmm.
the reason that you cut corners is because if you're like most of us, you were not raised in an environment where you were meditating daily. You were not taught that. If you're like me, you didn't learn to meditate, until your 20s, and many people don't learn until much, much later in life.
Mm-hmm. True.
So they haven't had the ability to build up an appreciation or the cumulative benefits associated with a practice of, say, 20, 30, 40 years. And, so the something like holosync is intentionally meant to be kind of cutting corners a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
There may be sacrifices that go with using holosync or other sound-based meditations or technologies for meditation.
Mm-hmm.
But there are also many benefits, and one of the benefits is it speeds the process up a lot. The same way that getting on a plane is going to get you from LA to New York or anywhere else a lot faster than walking. It's
Mm-hmm.
just a different form of transportation, and there are pros and cons to each one.
Got it. Yeah, I think that's a good explanation. Thank you. So, what are some of the other ways to create sacred spacing? Perhaps I don't, is writing something that might, like journaling or things like that, or
Yeah, that's a
what
place to
other,
start.
yeah, what other kinds of things? If somebody just isn't, it just doesn't feel like that's what they want to do is meditate. It's not
Meditating.
calling to them. What other things might they do to create that space for value?
I think that the doors are pretty wide open. I just think that there's a point, though, that it needs to be different enough from your normal routine.
Mm-hmm.
It's not going to fall in the category of watching the next episode of American Idol or something. That's not quite the idea.
Right.
The point is that it is sort of is oil on the water. It doesn't blend in. It's not supposed to. It's not supposed to look like everything else that you're doing in your life. or it loses that sacred element. And, you know, some may bristle at that term, and I understand why, because it kind of comes laden with some maybe religious connotations or something that not everybody's fond of. But to me, personal growth work is sacred. It has to be, because thinking of it in those terms is what makes me compelled to set aside the time and value it. So I think that journaling would be a good thing to do. I think sometimes people, though, I'm always kind of amused by people who come up and say, well, I don't want to meditate. And I don't like meditation. And to me, that's like someone telling me that they don't like music. You know, there are so many kinds of music out there that maybe there are some people that just simply don't like music. But my guess is most people who would say something like that just haven't found music that kind of clicks with them or that resonates with them. And I think of meditation the same way. You know, I've got a dear friend of mine who her practice of meditation has been for years that each night before bed, she lights a candle and sits at her dining room table in a regular good old-fashioned straight-back chair, makes herself a cup of tea, and just spends about, you know, a few minutes just looking at that burning candle in the dark and sipping on her tea. Nice. This is space that she sets aside just for her. No phone calls, no conversations, TV's off. You know, she's just not engaged in anything else but that particular moment. She's not watching the clock. And this is her sacred space. So, you know, whether or not we can legitimately call that meditation, I don't think is as important as the fact that this for her is what works and creates that sense of the sacred, of time without distraction and time without having to do, go.
Right. I like that. That sounds really, really lovely. I was wondering about things like, well, journaling, but in the sense of just being in the like stream of consciousness and just writing without thinking.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Or perhaps taking some colored pencils or just a pencil and paper or drawing or maybe some watercolors or something. And without having a goal, just seeing what happens.
You must be reading my mind. This is something I've taught people for years. And it's sort of a weird exercise, and I'll share it with you here.
Oh, great.
If you think people might be interested
Absolutely.
in this. And I will admit something. You know, this is often done to kind of facilitate a certain breakthrough when you're coaching somebody along and they're stuck. And this is something I would often give somebody who's very left brain, who's trying to kind of problem solve or analyze their way through a challenge in their lives of some kind. And I'm coming up with ways of incorporating the other half of their wisdom, which is their unconscious mind, and not just the conscious mind. Okay, so art therapy and play therapy is a way to do that. And so what I tell them to do, and this is very simple, is I ask them first, are you artistic? And if they say something to me like, well, you know, I sort of dabbled in some sketching when I was, you know, younger or something, then I'll immediately know not to suggest that they sketch, because if they do that, they're going to, whatever they do, they're going to compare to past performance. Okay, or they're going to be trying to improve on, you know, their current kind of baseline for their talent. So what you want to do is find something that they haven't done before. And this is going to be art, and it could be messy. So they could get a box of crayons. They could go out and buy some Play-Doh. You know, I happen to know you can get like 6 cans of Play-Doh for like $4.99.
Wow.
That's still a really good deal. So, you know, you can get some glue and some toothpicks, or you can get some old popsicle sticks, and, you know, what, it doesn't matter.
A collage would be. I mean, a lot of people have never done a collage, and that's kind of fun, because you go kind of like on a hunt for, you know, pictures or items to just create something.
So you mean like going through magazines and finding images and stuff?
Yeah. And just you could even just look around the house or go outside and pick some flowers or dead things. I don't know. Just whatever comes to you. It seems like
find something interesting in the yard. That's right.
I mean, it seems like the idea is not to really have a goal.
Well, in fact, the idea is not just to not have a goal, but the rule about creating is that there are no rules. You can make anything you want, and it can be funny or it can be obscene. It can be disturbing. It can be meaningless. It can start as one thing and become something else halfway through. It doesn't have to mean anything. But the other rule is that once you are done, and you decide when it is that you are done, but it is done at a sitting. It's not done over the course. You're not creating a masterpiece that's going to the Metropolitan Museum.
Okay.
In fact, it's going in the trash.
Oh.
You're going to complete it. You're going to note what it is, and then you're going to get rid of it.
Why?
Because at that point, what you're doing when you create is you are investing a piece of yourself. And when you're struggling with an issue and you're using art as therapy, creation as therapy, you're not doing it for the product. You're doing it for the process.
Got it.
And oftentimes what usually happens, now if you decide, hey, I've just created something that, I'm going to put on eBay and make money on, go for it, I guess. But the point is that there's probably pieces of your unconscious resistance, like we talked about before, that have sort of, it's going to sound a little maybe, woo-woo, as Bill used to say.
Yes.
But there's been a certain transference of energy from you into this creation that you've done. It's sort of like the Frankenstein monster thing. There was a piece of Dr. Frankenstein in the monster that was ultimately kind of the interesting part for me anyway of that book. It's an amazing book, amazing story. But anyway, the creation piece of it is you're kind of unloading some of your unconscious resistance and internal blockages, maybe even toxic stuff, into this thing you create, even if it becomes a thing of beauty. And the moment you destroy it or you get rid of it, you break your attachment to those things. You have sort of officially released, and you've used both sides of your conscious and your unconscious, your left and right hemispheres, to do that. So it's very powerful. Now, again, remember, you're doing something that you're not, if you're a professional writer, that's not going to work if you're writing. That's why it's recommended to do something you're not used to doing.
I see.
Okay. So you wouldn't, for example, you're a beautiful musician with the harp. I've heard you play. It's not like you would write a beautiful piece for the harp and then throw that away. Okay. Because that's your value space. But you might do something artistically that you create and then you crumple that up and throw that away. And it's hard for people to do, but I'm telling you, once they do it, it is one of the most liberating things people go through.
That's fascinating. Is there a better way to get rid of it than, is crumpling good, or is it better to burn it, or?
There are people that have burned it, for safety reasons. I usually recommend that people get the fire out.
Right.
But yeah, you can run it over with a bulldozer if you want to. It doesn't so much matter. The point is that you're not keeping it around anymore.
You're letting it go.
You're letting it go. It's become now a thought form rather than a thing. And it's served its purpose.
Mark, that's excellent. Thank you so much for sharing that. I have a strong sense that a lot of listeners are going to want to do that. Try it.
I hope so. Yeah. And, before we wrap up, I just wanted to remind people too, because you told me I could do this, which is to let people know about Holosync. I know, not everybody's cup of tea is going to be using Holosync for meditation, but I'm telling you, there are so many people getting involved with this right now. I've been here for 22 years, and the surge in interest in this, and I think really, we could go on about kind of what state the world is in these days. But I'm telling you, this is a perfect time for people to take up meditation of some kind. So if anybody's interested in what Centerpoint's about or what I do, what Holosync really is, and does this stuff really work, and all the usual questions, there's going to be a link you said I think was going to be on the page.
Why don't you tell it to us too, because not everyone does go to the website.
Sure,
and
that's fine.
We'll have both.
So this is, I'll just read this out, and then it is just going to be www.holosync, which is HOLOSYNC.com. And then there's a / and it says 5DC-registration. So
is that the number
5?
5.
DC with a dash or hyphen, the word registration. And that
Registration.
stands for 5-day challenge, and that's what you would sign up for. There's no cost to this. It's really just intended to give people a taste. And even if you sign up for it and you don't do it, if you sign up for it, one of the cool things is you get to see all these comments from other people who are doing it. These are not, these are real users on a daily basis. And every time I get in the office, first thing I do is I open up the 5-day challenge comments and see what kinds of experiences people are having. It's so much fun. So even if that's all you do, just sign up and read. You can, you will be on our mailing list. Yes, you can opt out immediately if you want to. But it's so much fun to go in there and just read the comments from people who are just getting such an amazing, impactful experience out of this.
That's cool. Now, so 5-day challenge, is it to stick with it for 5 days? Is that the challenge, or what's the challenge?
Yeah, every day there's a short video to watch, and that each video, what you see on the video is our founder, Bill Harris, who developed the program, and the 5-day challenge was his idea. So you'd watch a short video, and then there is I think it's 14-minute long meditation. Mm-hmm. So you plug your headphones into your laptop or your phone or your computer. You sit back and you listen, and you're listening to real, legitimate, holosync. It's rainfall. It's Tibetan crystal bowls, which we use these sounds for specific reasons. Mm-hmm. And then the holosync is embedded beneath it. Sometimes you'll hear a little bit of a hum, which is the technology. Sometimes you won't. Mm-hmm. And you just kind of sit back and notice your feelings, and gives you a chance to kind of start your practice of sacred spacing 14 minutes a day. And if you do 1 or 2 days and you give up or you stop and decide it's not for you, no problem. But most people do get through all 5 days and love it.
Can you repeat it, or does it
Sure.
go away after the 5 days and you don't?
No, you can listen to it over and over. Yeah.
Oh, cool. Well, that's a nice way to start. It's an easy, obviously inexpensive way to start your personal space time.
Yeah, and I mean, most people. I do want to say, in all fairness, it's not a substitute for the main program track. So it really is meant to be a sample, a taste. So please don't get the idea that this is going to completely revolutionize your life just by doing a few days. It does take time to get the benefit out of this, but it's a great way to kind of kickstart your sacred spacing practice, if nothing else, whether you join our program.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking. I mean, obviously it's a marketing thing, and it's to get people in, but still you don't have to, and it's free. And if you can't think of something else you'd like to create your space for yourself, at least this is an easy thing to do.
Exactly. That's right. Yeah. So sign up if you want to. If you have any questions, though, certainly you're always welcome to call. A lot of people don't know that we have a support team here. These are not call center people who are just here to take an order.
Right.
We have a great team of coaches that's been assembled, and so if you ever want to call and ask questions or get to know us a little bit, do you care if I get the number out?
No, go ahead. Yeah, no, because I know for a fact that this is a well-trained team. So.
Yep, I know you do, and we appreciate you saying that. But you can reach our Centerpoint team Monday through Friday from 9 a.m. Pacific to 4:30 Pacific at 503-672-7117. So give us a call. That's why we're here, is to talk to folks like you, and whether you're in the program or not, we'd love to hear some feedback from you and see how you're doing.
Cool. That's great. Well, Marc, this has been really, really valuable. I'm really glad we did this. I'm so glad I thought of having you on.
Well, me too. It's been a lot of fun.
I know. And reconnecting as I've said, I'm sure people are tired of me saying this, but reconnecting with old friends has been the highlight of my doing this. I'm just so grateful that I can do it and that I can reconnect with people who I hold dear. It's been really, really nice.
Well, I appreciate you saying that, and it's always a pleasure to talk to you. You've got a special place in my heart, and
thank you.
And you're doing an awesome job with your podcast and everything else that you're doing. So it's a lot of great content out there. I hope people are paying attention to all that material.
Oh, thank you. The main thing for me is to get people to share and just get it out there, because this is my service. I really do feel like the people that I'm having on my podcast have some really good things to say and important, and they're smart people and they're knowledgeable and experienced and they have a lot to share. And so not just for me, but for you guys. I want to get it out, to increase the listener base. So
yeah, well, it's been an honor to be a part of that. I really appreciate it.
Oh, well, thank you. It's been really fun. I appreciate it.
You bet.
So, take care.
Okay, thanks, Janine.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you, Mark.
All right.
Ciao.
Bye-bye.
Thank you for listening, and thank you so much, Marc Gilson, for sharing your wisdom and expertise with us. I know I'm going to benefit from this conversation, and I hope you do too. The podcast website is realjanine.com, where you can listen and download episodes. Sign up for the podcast bi-weekly blog newsletter to keep up on new episodes, archives, life updates, and remember there's always a yummy recipe. And remember, Janine is Janean. To subscribe to Keeping It Real with Janine, go to iTunes or your favorite podcast provider. And I have a Keeping It Real with Janine YouTube channel now. I'm creating video slideshows of all my conversations. So please check it out. Go to YouTube at Keeping It Real with Janine and subscribe. That'll really help me out. Do you know someone who would benefit from my conversation with Marc Gilson? I know you do. Please share the love. Thanks for listening. Take care and be well.